right, so if you're just now joining, welcome. This is a public meeting to kick off our public engagement efforts around the creation of our future 5-year strategic research plan, which will cover funding years 2025 through 2030. We have several public engagement options as we prepare this plan, and I'd like to turn it over to our division chief, Elizabeth Shealy, to walk us through the importance of this plan and the public engagement process.
Thank you, Sonia. I wanted to spend a few moments giving background on how the 5-year strategic research plan fits into the agency and some of our goals, as Sonia mentioned. I'm Elizabeth Shealy, the Research Division Chief at CARB. So CARB is a public state agency, and our main mission is to improve health for all Californians by meeting national ambient air quality standards and to reduce emissions that contribute to climate change. CARB's research program serves this mission by providing cutting-edge scientific information that meets the needs of various regulatory and incentive programs at CARB. Because our research must be policy relevant and actionable, it requires us to collaborate extensively with other state agencies, academic partners, community members, tribes, and environmental justice advocates so that we can create a research program that serves CARB's mission centered on public health. We have made some important changes that I want to go over on how we approach this plan compared to our previous strategic research plan. First, we're holding this public meeting early in the process of defining future research priorities. We'll have a follow-up meeting later this year to get input on the overall future research priorities to be included in the plan. In addition, we are being more intentional in ensuring environmental justice priorities are embedded in every area we do research in. We've contracted with community-based organizations to co-create research questions that apply a racial equity lens. As part of that process, we'll be hosting regional in-person research roundtables to hear directly from community members on potential research questions that address knowledge and research gaps related to environmental issues in their community or region. So we're very excited to hear from you today, and I will pass it back to Sonia. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So next, I'd like to introduce the branch chiefs for the research program that will give a very brief overview of their area of focus. So let's hear from Bonnie Holmes-Jen first.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Bonnie Holmes-Jen. I'm branch chief for the Health Exposure and Assessment branch, one of the 3 branches in the research division. And I'm going to mention 3 key areas quickly that we're focused on. One is we're focused on building a more comprehensive understanding of the health impacts of air pollution and climate change through our research program. A second area is conducting health analysis of board rules and programs to better understand the health benefits and quantify those benefits. And a third area is we have a number of health projects related to wildfire smoke and health protection, building decarbonization, and air cleaner certification and indoor air quality. So look forward to hearing all of your input on health issues today.
Thank you, Bonnie. So next, let's turn it over to Mike Fitzgibbon.
Thank you, Sonia. Good afternoon. I'm Mike Fitzgibbon, one of the 3 branch chiefs here in the research division. I'm the chief of the Atmospheric Sciences and Climate Strategies branch. My branch oversees and conducts research on air quality and climate change. This includes research related to short-lived climate pollutants such as methane, hydrofluorocarbons, and black carbon. And recent projects with universities we have include research on wildfires, dairy emissions, and nitrogenous soil emissions. We also conduct in-house research using state-of-the-art mobile measurement platforms. So look forward to the discussion today. Back to you, Sonia.
Thanks so much, Mike. And next, I'll turn it over to Jorn Herner.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Jorn Herner. Thank you all for coming today. I look forward to the discussion and getting the input. So in my branch, we have the research planning process, which is what we're doing today, in addition to the agency's motor vehicle emissions research. So everything mobile source related. That includes both tailpipe and non-tailpipe emissions, such as tire and brake wear, and also a motor vehicle air conditioning program where we're trying to reduce greenhouse gases associated with mobile air conditioning. We also have a research program to use ambient measurements of greenhouse gases to both quantify emissions and to inform our mitigation program. And this includes remote sensing using both airplanes and very soon satellites to pinpoint individual localized sources of greenhouse gases. Thank you. Back to you, Sonia.
Thanks, Jorn. Okay, so before I jump into the presentation, I would like to know if there's anyone who would prefer to hear the presentation in Spanish. We don't have live translation, but we've pre-recorded the presentation we're about to give in Spanish. And I'll ask that question in Spanish as well. Buenas tardes. Quería saber si hay alguien aquí que prefiere oír la presentación en español. No tenemos traducción en vivo, pero sí grabamos esta presentación en español y puedo pasarles el enlace para que lo vean antes de la discusión que vamos a tener después. Pueden usar el chat o también usar la mano para dejarme saber que necesita ese enlace. Okay, I think there isn't anyone who needs to see that. I'm going to relaunch the poll. I see that some folks don't see the poll. Oh, that'll clear existing polling results. Just kidding. I'll share the results. All right, so I'm going to go to the next slide and start our presentation. Great. So for today's agenda, we will start with an overview of CARB's research program, and then we will provide an overview of the policy drivers for each area of research we focus on. At around 3:30, we will start our discussion. The plan is to have 2 rounds of 5 breakout rooms. Each of you will be able to choose the research category you're interested in for each round. So since it seems like we have fewer people than expected, we might, depending on how many people choose which categories they're interested in, we might break it up a little bit differently. But I'll launch polls after the end of this presentation to figure that out. So that limits you to 2 areas of focus for this meeting. During each discussion round, we will provide a survey or questionnaire that everyone can fill out to ensure we hear from every meeting attendee, and we will step you through 4 question prompts. After the discussion rooms, we will briefly go over next steps. For the next several slides, I will be providing a high-level summary of CARB's mission, the research program's role at CARB, and a summary of the role our strategic plans play in driving our research programs. After that, I will summarize the policy drivers and current research focus in the 5 major areas we do research in, and that includes health, climate, air quality, mobile sources, and sustainable communities and transport. Note that we do focus on environmental justice in all of 5 of those areas. If you have questions about the presentation slides, please put them in the chat. Our branch chiefs and research staff will be monitoring that and helping to provide responses in the chat. I will pause between the research category slides to see if the branch chiefs want to answer any of your questions verbally or if you have any additional questions. Great, so moving on. All right, so the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, is a state agency focused on air quality, environmental justice, climate change, mobile source emissions, and sustainable communities. These priorities reflect our mission to provide clean air for all Californians by setting standards at levels that protect those at greatest risk. We also identify pollutants of risk and measure our progress using an extensive monitoring network. CARB leads California's efforts to reduce climate-changing emissions through measures that promote a more energy efficient and resilient economy. In addition, we research causes and effects of air pollution problems to identify potential solutions, and we pay particular attention to communities most at risk. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is the federal agency that sets and enforces the national ambient air quality standards and regulates interstate transportation. CARB, on the other hand, is the state agency that regulates mobile sources of air pollution, greenhouse gases, and consumer products within the state. At the local level, local air districts regulate stationary and local sources of air pollution. CARB coordinates with these agencies at the federal and local level to collectively meet our environmental goals. The CARB research program is an essential part of CARB's mission to enact air pollution and climate change measures that are grounded in sound science and data. It was legislatively mandated in 1971 and provides sound science to support CARB's various programs. The CARB research program uses internal coordination as well as external community engagement to understand current research needs related to CARB priorities. Our program is also informed by emerging topics in air pollution and climate change. With that information, we oversee in-house research, contracted research projects, and we collaborate with other agencies and outside entities to inform CARB programs. For the contracted research projects, CARB's research program has an annual budget of about $4 to $6 million a year, and that enables us to fund around 10 to 12 research projects every year to inform our program needs. So CARB creates strategic research plans to aid us in our planning and outreach efforts. The most recent plan was the Triennial Strategic Research Plan covering fiscal years 2021 through 2024. Each plan is developed through a public process. This year, we have already kicked off our annual comment and concept collection survey with an additional third option to submit research priorities for the next 5 years that will inform the upcoming 5-year plan. Today's meeting also kicks off our public process to develop the upcoming plan, and we have other engagement options planned throughout this year. Our strategic research plans lay out the future research priorities that are informed both by the public process and CARB's mission and jurisdiction. The plan helps us strategically plan for research priorities based on future programmatic needs, upcoming regulations, or upcoming air quality or climate goals. Following from there, it is an important tool in selecting projects each year that meet our program needs. In the currently closing triennial plan, and especially in the upcoming plan, we are placing a greater emphasis on racial equity and environmental justice in our research. That impacts both how we approach research prioritization, as well as the types of projects we fund. Finally, these plans provide details and clarity on our planning process and helps guide the public and all public partners in collaborating with us. Today's meeting is all about figuring out what our future research priorities will be, and that will inform the next plan, which will cover fiscal years 2025 through 2030. We anticipate that this new plan will be ready sometime at the end of this calendar year or early 2025. In order to collect feedback on future research priorities from you today, we've prepared a presentation that summarizes the policy drivers for each of the major research topics. So I'm going to pause here briefly and see if there's any questions in the chat. I'm not seeing any. So for now, I'm going to move forward and keep moving forward on our presentation. Okay, great. So let's start with health. CARB's mission is to promote and protect public health, welfare, and ecological resources through effective reduction of air pollutants while recognizing and considering effects on the economy. CARB is the lead agency for climate change programs and oversees all air pollution control efforts in California to attain and maintain health-based air quality standards. When developing new regulations and programs, we assess their health benefits by translating reductions in emissions to health outcomes. Some of the components of this include evaluating population exposures and impacts of emissions or emission reductions, as well as utilizing and refining health analysis tools. We also update our knowledge of air quality and linkages with health outcomes. CARB's health research is geared towards filling knowledge gaps that can continue to inform this important process. Our research is also used to inform the public so that the public can take better health protective measures. Our health research needs are also driven by programs like the Air Toxic Control Program, by better understanding the health impacts of exposures to toxic air pollutants and to understand which pollutants of concern need to be prioritized. These are statutory requirements per Assembly Bill 2588 and 1807. Finally, an additional driver of our health research is to understand the health impacts of climate change and mitigation measures. Okay. Health analysis is a critical area of focus for our health research program. This graphic illustrates the need for us to tie the major regulated pollutants to health outcomes. This pyramid shows the various health effects associated with air pollution exposure, with the outcomes towards the bottom of the pyramid impacting more people compared to the ones towards the top. So traditionally, our health analysis method quantified the impacts of pollutants on the top two pieces of the pyramid: mortality, cardiovascular and respiratory hospitalizations, and asthma emergency room visits. More recently, we have expanded our health analysis methodology to include other health outcomes, including lost workdays, as well as neurological and other respiratory and cardiovascular effects. And beyond this pyramid, there are also other important health outcomes to consider, including birth outcomes, metabolic effects, and neurological effects. Okay, this slide summarizes the research we are currently funding or doing in-house. We are actively engaged in expanding our health analysis tools to include more health outcomes. We are actively researching indoor air quality and related health impacts. We're also funding a project on short-term exposures to wildfire smoke, and we are looking at the health impacts in overburdened communities. An active area of research includes looking at exposure disparities and environmental justice in priority communities. We're also currently working on the associations between climate stressors like heat and health outcomes. Finally, we are actively working on research related to toxics. Okay, I don't see any comments in the chat. Are there any questions? You can use the raised hand feature if you have any questions about the health research that we've presented so far. Seeing none, I will move forward. So climate is another really important area of research for CARB's research program. CARB is the lead agency fulfilling the requirements mandated by Assembly Bill 32. CARB's recent 2022 scoping plan for achieving carbon neutrality summarizes our statewide climate change mitigation goals, which includes reducing anthropogenic emissions by to 85% below 1990 levels by 2045. This plan also takes the unprecedented step of adding carbon neutrality as a science-based guide and touchstone for California's climate work. The plan outlines how carbon neutrality can be achieved by taking bold steps to reduce greenhouse gases to meet the anthropogenic emissions target, and by expanding actions to capture and store carbon through the state's natural and working lands, and using a variety of mechanical approaches. As part of CARB's climate change work, we maintain an inventory of greenhouse gas sources that includes transportation, fossil fuel production, industry, and energy generation. In addition, natural and working lands can act as a source and a sink. Other sinks for greenhouse gases include direct air capture, carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration. This summary of sources and sinks correlates to some of the research our program is focusing on, including research into natural and working lands, researching methane and other short-lived climate pollutants, supporting our greenhouse gas inventory needs, looking at the equity impacts and community needs around climate pollutants, and mitigation and researching greenhouse gas co-pollutants and associated health implications. All right, moving on to air quality. So CARB's regulatory programs have had significant success in reducing pollutants and pollution exposure. This heat map shows the large reduction in 8-hour average ozone between 1993 and 2020, but more work is yet needed. We have upcoming air quality and environmental justice targets. For example, in 2023 and 2025, we have current ozone and PM 2.5 attainment goals. We also have a goal to identify toxics impacting AB 617 communities and improve tools to guide decisions for the air toxics program. In 2030, we have a more stringent PM 2.5 attainment goal of 12 micrograms per meter cube. In 2032, we have to reach the 75 parts per billion 8-hour ozone standard. We also must obtain lasting emissions reductions in AB 617 communities and reduce toxics of major concern. In 2037, we must meet the 70 parts per billion 8-hour ozone standard. Finally, the Environmental Protection Agency recently released an updated standard for PM 2.5 of 9 micrograms per meter cube, which we will have to meet in the future. These regulatory targets are important drivers for our research needs. Currently, our air quality research is focused on understanding sources and formation of air pollution in different regions. Places like the San Joaquin Valley have specific emission sources and meteorological conditions that lead to unique pollution profiles. We are also actively funding the development of new tools and methods for air quality monitoring of both criteria and toxics pollutants. An ongoing research priority is to better characterize emission factors from previously uncharacterized sources and to investigate the impacts of climate change on air quality. Still not seeing any questions in the chat. All right, moving on to mobile sources. CARB has jurisdiction over mobile sources of emissions within the state. Currently, our greenhouse gas emission inventory estimates that almost 40% of all greenhouse gases come from transportation. In addition, our emission inventory estimates that mobile sources are still a significant source of PM 2.5 and by far the largest source of NOx statewide. Given the importance of mobile sources as a contributor to climate and air pollutants, we have maintained a significant amount of research in this area. Currently, we're working on low NOx vehicle testing, advanced sensor technology and monitoring to help modernize enforcement. We're looking at non-exhaust emission sources such as brake and tire wear because of emerging concerns about their impact on air pollution. We are actively researching advanced technologies on how they can continue to help reduce emissions from this sector. We are actively researching electric vehicle energy efficiency, and we're continuing to research the impact of high emitters, especially in environmental justice communities. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about sustainable communities and transportation. Many of our climate and air pollution challenges come from land use, our built environment, and how we interact with it. In order to address climate change and air pollution from that perspective, Senate Bill 375 mandates that regional plans be implemented with specific targets for emissions reductions. On the left is a table showing the Metropolitan Planning Organizations, or MPOs, that have emission reduction targets for years 2020 and 2035. These MPOs are also pictured in the map. In order to meet these targets, MPOs must leverage sustainable community strategies, such as increasing infill housing, maximizing affordable housing, encouraging transit-oriented housing, and increasing investment in transit and active transportation. We're tracking metrics like vehicle miles traveled reductions, greenhouse gas by region, numbers of housing units and types added over time, accessibility between housing and important amenities, overall housing costs, and level of investment into the transportation infrastructure. These program needs drive our current research in this area, which includes looking at anti-displacement strategies, investigating the factors impacting changes in VMT, examining the impacts of affordable infill housing on reaching our targets on the important metrics mentioned earlier, looking at the nexus of climate, air quality, and transportation as an integrated framework, investigating the requirements and costs for decarbonizing buildings, and better understanding the needs and impacts of zero-emission vehicles on energy needs and emissions. Finally, an important and active area of research includes whether the proposed solutions can be accessed equitably. All right, so before we move on to our discussion rooms, are there any questions from the audience about the policy drivers behind our research programs or any of the current research that we're doing? I'm not seeing any. You could use oh, I see a question from Natasha. Let me allow you to unmute. So I think you should be able to unmute
Yeah,
now.
sorry, I was trying to figure out how to do that. When we were looking at the map of when you were doing your air quality research, we noticed that the Inland Empire wasn't on there. Do we have data for that for Inland Empire, specifically like San Bernardino County? Because our program is focusing on air quality within that region.
Are you talking about this map?
Yes.
Okay. I'm wondering if Toshi or Mike can answer that question.
So I'm trying to make sure I understand it specifically. I mean, the Inland Empire I mean, it's on the map here. What are you looking for particularly, Natasha?
Let me.
Do we still have Natasha?
Yeah, I might be having to ask her to unmute. Okay, there we go. I
Okay.
just asked her to unmute. Natasha, can you clarify your question?
Well, I think from a
Right, it
ship.
wasn't letting me
There
do
she
it.
is.
Sorry, I kept pressing the button. I kept saying I couldn't do it. So for the Inland Empire, when you're doing your research, do you have data for specific regions like San Bernardino County and regions within San Bernardino County?
Yeah, well, the air quality monitoring we do is statewide, so we do have monitors in the Inland Empire. I don't know if Toshi wants to address exactly where they're at, but yeah, we do, have monitors out there, and we're looking at ways to reduce get emissions reduced in the. It's very important out there, but Rick, I'm not sure if you're talking like the warehouse districts out there and all that, but we recognize those are significant sources of pollution out there in Ontario, and we see that in the satellites, we see that in the air quality measurements, so we're very aware of the pollution sources out that way. I hope I'm addressing your question, Natasha.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that.
Great, thanks, Natasha. Thank you, Mike. Any other questions? Feel free to use the raised hand feature or put it in the chat. All right. Oh, I see a question from Angie Hacker. So I'll ask you to unmute and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi there. I'm Angie Hacker with Prosper Sustainably, representing California Climate and Energy Collaborative under CivicWell and also Tribal Climate Health Project in a different project. But one question that comes up a lot with us when we work with local governments is whether or not how much information or of the data that's already being developed may be available on a jurisdictional basis. So in particular on climate, on GHG emission reductions. if there were even a way to request data, I'm just curious what kind of data you have now that may actually be defined by jurisdiction.
Can you clarify if you're talking more about just greenhouse gases or the sort of the data that the metropolitan planning organizations are collecting? What level of data are you looking for?
You know, ideally greenhouse gas emissions, but if not that, then folks are telling us regularly how difficult it is to get VMT. I see it here, VMT data, which I know is complicated to compile at a jurisdictional level. It's done differently than it is at a statewide level, and also energy data.
Okay, thank you for the question. Does anybody want to jump in and answer that question? Could probably get a response from.
This is Jorn. I can answer about the spatially disaggregated greenhouse gas emissions, and we collect greenhouse. It's not part of the research, but for inventory purposes, we do collect emissions, greenhouse gas emissions for the state. But since we are a statewide, our greenhouse gas emission reduction program is statewide, so we really just keep track of it for the whole state.
And if there's specific, I just wanted to add, if there's specific data that you're looking for, we're happy to follow up with you if you want to send us a note on any specific information, either in the chat or follow up on an email. There is some information that's available at an aggregated level through our mandatory reporting program as well, but usually that has to be aggregated. But if there's a specific question on energy, that may also, we can reach out and see if there's some data that might suffice for your needs.
Great. Thank you, Jorn and Elizabeth. And thank you for the question. Okay, so I'm going to ask Eden or Eden. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I'll ask you to unmute. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, I apologize. I raised my hand and then lowered it. I think it's better for the breakout session later. Thanks.
Okay. Sounds good. So I hope you all had great discussions in the 2 rounds of rooms that you were in. Your responses should be captured by our note takers and by the Zoom survey application. We will be aggregating what we hear today and integrating it into our future research needs. If you are interested in submitting more ideas beyond the ones that you commented on today, you can submit those through the comment and concepts survey. So I'm going to pull that up now so you can see what that looks like. Just give me a second here. And I'm going to put the link in the chat as well. So first off, chat. So you should see a link to the forms in the chat. I'm going to share my screen as well. So this is what our annual comment and concept survey looks like. We're already collecting concepts to be funded in 2025 and 2026, but also for the 5-year plan. So there's an option 3 that when you hit that option and you hit next, then it takes you to a way for you to submit more comments and concepts for the 5-year plan specifically. So that's roughly what it looks like. You can give us a very open-ended research need or research question that you think we should consider including in the 5-year plan. Going back to my presentation. Great. So yeah, in August of this year, we will have a follow-up meeting to discuss proposed research initiatives. You'll have the opportunity to attend that meeting and provide feedback. A full draft plan will be available as early as late December of this year. And once the full plan is available for public review, you can submit comments through the public docket and then tune into the board hearing in early 2025. So please remember that you can submit additional ideas through the survey. That is due April 10th.